Good afternoon. We are reconvening the regular meeting of the Bi-State Bridge Authority at 4:40 p.m. on June 10th. Let the record show Commissioners Fox, Babbitt, Polson are present. Commissioners Anderson, Gibson, and alternate Wilson is sitting in. And we will go back to our PFM discussion for, I think, the last slide and questions and answers. I'm sure we'll get to the question. I got a couple of them. Okay.
Go back and try to recreate the flow. But folks may have questions to regenerate serves. We motivate the discussion.
Can you go back to the debt service slide?
Yeah. There's this one or there's
okay. Go to start on that one. The one with the graph.
Previous right.
The previous one, yeah.
Yeah.
So you were saying that over the life of the loan, they're expecting us to provide a 1.7x debt service.
Average, yeah. If you were to average the column on the right after they stress it. So if you take our numbers and you average it, we're better than 1.7 by far. But they will stress test the numbers to the left, and then make us hit the 1.7.
Okay.
Is it weighted?
It's not. It shouldn't be weighted.
So it's a straight average.
Yeah.
And then where do they get, like, what percentage do they use on their stress test? Is there industry standard, or I mean?
Yeah, there is. What they're going to ultimately do is when CDM Smith gets to that point where they've got their investment grade, they're not just going to take revenues and say, please cut your revenues by 10%. They're going to say, please stress some of the sort of fundamental factors that are driving revenue. So they'll reduce, maybe stress the value of time. That's an input to the model that shows your willingness to pay. And so they might stress that. They might stress trip generators. They'll sort of indirectly stress this big TNR model. That'll have the same effect as stress.
So they basically say, hey, we're gonna shut the bridge down for 2 weeks a year for heavy maintenance, which drives your goal.
That's pretty severe. They might not shut it.
Where do you think we need to be? So I mean, I calculated it, and I don't know if I did this right, but I got 2.27 as what our average debt service would be from when we take out the money to when we've repaid it all.
Okay.
Where do you think we need to be? I mean, can we, is there room to drop that down? Or I guess I should start by asking, is this even a question that's worth discussing because we've already submitted these numbers to?
I think people are kind of getting to the roundabout same question, which is, here's the step that we are at. We have taken a revenue forecast, which was developed by CDM Smith, has a whole lot of thought and granularity to it. From that, we structured a loan, gives us particular coverages. We also have estimates for O&M, R&R deposits, everything else. We showed them we could demonstrate, we could fund all our needs, and we've created a cash flow that creates some debt service coverage. And so this ending sort of result can support a $105 million loan. So we showed them a $105 million. We showed them 3 different versions, this being the largest. And this was as far as we could go. So we know that if we start with the revenue curve provided by CDM Smith, this is what we can support. And so we've kind of backed into, we now have knowledge that they are stressing this to get to 1.7. This kind of results in 1.7 for them.
Yeah, because I mean, I think where all of and sorry for the budget committee that's just joining now, because we already discussed this for a half hour or so, but I think where the concern is just, are we forecasting, or are we setting ourselves up to charge more in bridge tolls, and especially the escalations where, we start to get farther above the debt service coverage ratios than we absolutely need to, and are we going to be locked into those if we don't in fact need the money?
Yeah. two parts to that question. That's a complicated question, but it's sort of the on-spot question. So as we're in the application phase for the loan and we're still living with the forecast, new bridge hasn't been opened. Nobody's delivered a new bridge, nobody's driven on it, right? All forecasted.
Mhm.
During the forecast, we need to sort of own the forecast and largely say our actions are going to be consistent with this forecast unless we see something very different, right? So that's the sort of messaging. This forecast, if you will, supports the sort of investment grade BBB minus. Then you fast forward to the opening of the bridge. Bridge opens. What if your performance is just as forecasted? In other words, they're haircutting it, right? What if you come in right on forecast and you have 2, 3, 4, 5 years, let's call it 5. Their methodology, they being Kroll's, kind of looks back at least a 5-year period. If you have strong performance on or better than forecast, you may have some flexibility to go and start, rethinking what your existing rates are and how they have to grow.
Okay, so.
So let me just repeat that.
Yep.
You can't really do that at this point in time until the bridge is open. Once you have a 5-year operating performance, you can reevaluate. That's kind of the punchline.
So if the plan right now says we're not going to raise the rates until we open the bridge, and every 5 years we have this step.
Yeah.
And this study says you need 15% every time you do it. And if you do that, you qualify for the $105 million.
Right.
We're proceeding down now. We're about to open the bridge. The bridge costs less than what we thought it was going to, which means that we didn't have to use all 105. So we use 70 of it.
Right.
We're still locked into the growth curve until such time we change it. And we get approval from TIFIA to change it.
You will, at that point, we'll have some covenants in the agreement, and the agreement will say, once the operations begin, we'll have to meet certain metrics. And let's say we successfully negotiate a metrics that says your net revenue has to equal 1.25, a minimum of 1.25. Mm-hmm. So we have to maintain that. That's one legal parameter we can't violate. Mm-hmm. Let's say you outperform that for the first 2 or 3 years, looking good. Then it's a discussion with the rating agencies. TIFIA will also have a condition that says you cannot take any action the rating agencies will continue to monitor this loan and provide an annual surveillance and rate it. So you will not be able to take any actions that take this out, that probably lead to a downgrade. And if we're at a BBB minus, it'll essentially say you can't take it out of investment grade. But that's the 2-part test. We can't violate any legal covenants that we agree to, the 1.25 times coverage parameter, for instance, and we can't take any actions that will lead to a downgrade. And so what if you open and say, shoot, we've got 5 years. We thought we'd be 1.5 times coverage. We're at 2 times coverage. This looks pretty good. All of a sudden our free cash flow is more than expected, and this is good. We could argue for an upgrade from the rating agencies at that point. Rather than do that, we could say we would like to, and the toll, the toll rate setting, expectations, not policy per se, but just change the toll rates, or not implement a planned toll increase in year 5. Again, after year 5, if that were the case, you're over and exceeding, you're at least at or exceeding your toll forecast. And then you can have a discussion with rating agencies. So you can tell that I hem and haw a little bit, because during this forecast period, you have to say, I own this. This is what I expected to do.
Sure.
And it is tempting to think ahead and say, like, goal 1 is to take care of the ratepayer. And so I want to minimize that burden, certainly. You got to be careful that does not contradict forecast. But certainly 5 years of strong performance, therewith comes flexibility.
How formulaic are those covenants?
They'll be very specified. Yeah, it'll be.
Are they? But you're saying 5 years, so do you know that's going to be that?
Yeah, no, it'll be an annual covenant. They'll say, you got to maintain certain coverages for us, TIFIA.
And if we say it's 125, then every June 30, we'll have to
It's a
perform that.
look back.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a look back of actual performance each
And
year.
so you're just saying from your experience, we're unlikely to convince them to let us make a change within first couple of years.
You know, we'll probably be able to negotiate a covenant, which is more lenient than the rating agencies will require. So if, in other words, we said, hey, we would like to, year 1, 12 months after opening, we would like to reduce rates to get us to 125. Rating agencies will say, no, it's too early. No, we're going to take you right out of triple B minus. You're going to be non-investment grade. So that, I think we'll be able to satisfy the legal covenant easier than satisfying the rating agencies earlier on. So that's,
What if we don't make the numbers? I mean, I know we're trying to be positive here, but like, you're like, oh, we're gonna do so great. We're gonna beat it in 5 years in. What if we don't actually, like, what happens?
good question. So what if you violate the toll covenant? What if you don't hit the 125? Then you have to bring in a traffic engineer. They have to review what happened. They have to review if it's sort of a structural issue. For instance, oh no, you're just not getting traffic. Or maybe
Go the lanes.
So you'll have to bring in a traffic engineer. They'll have to come in with recommendations, and then you will have to implement those recommendations. Within that, most typically, you need to increase rates. Is what they will compel you. They will certainly compel you to increase rates. Yeah. So that's something that's part of the discussion.
To me, the biggest impact for us is controlling the capital cost of the new bridge and holding it down. Because the traffic, we've got pretty good history. The traffic's the traffic, as long as you got a bridge there. Now, if there's a bridge there and it costs 50% more than what we had assumed when we set the rates, and we're gonna have to raise the rates.
Yep.
Right.
Well, the traffic's the traffic, but it does respond to economic disruption.
Right.
We don't know if there's not going to be a massive economic disruption in 5 years.
It's not, but the key thing to this whole thing is we've got to control the cost, capital cost of the new.
That's always, yeah.
The other thing to keep a takeaways, the way we've structured this loan repayment. It's tempting to say, oh, you need 1.7 to have 1.7 in each and every year. Right? That if you have a growing revenue curve, which you do, and then you structure your loan repayment, which is growing, and that coverage is constant in 1.7 each and every year, you're highly dependent on that growth. And that's not an assumption that the rating agencies like to see. It's like, man, not only do you need a pretty healthy revenue, you need it to grow. And if it stops growing for whatever reason, you're starting to slip. But our coverage is not that. Our coverage starts a little thin, and then by the end, you're 3 times coverage, right? So we're not heavily dependent on growth. The challenge is the opening years, as with every sort of single asset revenue bearing instrument like this. It's sort of like, you'll open it, it took a lot to build it. I needed a fairly large loan to complete it. And so prior to those revenues growing, even with inflation, it gets a little tight in terms of coverage, and then it grows better. So that's another way to look at this. Your flexibility with rate setting, it just gets better and better over time. It just gets better because we've structured it that way. You're not dependent on high growth. Once you have operating history, you're no longer talking about the forecast. You're talking about history and actuals, and then you'll have some flexibility to, again, do one of two things. Either take this accumulated cash, pay down the TIFIA loan, and then that burden decreases, and that allows you to lower rates. Or if you're just screamingly good, if it's 2 times coverage out of the gate, this traffic was higher than expected, then you let that play out for a few years, and that'll also 5 years, let's say, that'll also allow you to lower rates. So there will be flexibility. And particularly since this has such a strong operating history, we're not all wondering whether they're going to come once you build this, right? So,
Can you explain, Peter, why the debt service changes?
that's because we, as opposed to your home mortgage, which is level in each and every year, we realize that the revenue grows, and so we have put more increasing amount of principal repayment towards the back end, so it grows over time. Not in lockstep because it's not a constant coverage number, but it does. We realize that it's a little bit of a pinch point up front. You get to this year, And you see those early years revenue, we don't have a whole lot remaining in any of these years.
Mhm.
And it would be even less if we did a level debt service.
Yep, so
Yeah.
we proposed that intentionally.
We gave them a slightly backloaded principal repayment.
Okay.
That's just-
But you know,
The first
if we-
5 years, the first 5 years then are the closest with, so we actually, well, don't wanna have a big balance the first year if you look at it, because. You know, we're talking about like, if we think it's gonna be great, what you're predicting, what we all are looking at is, it's gonna be pretty close for the first couple years.
That's true.
So we need that first 5 years to even have some capacity to actually have any renegotiation power based on the graphs that you're showing us.
That is the exact right way to take it. Yes, yes.
But if we could work with the port and the port doesn't have to spend that money. There's $10 million sitting there on day one.
But we also don't know what this bridge is gonna cost.
We understand. There's lots and lots of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's always pulling that money out.
$10 million.
That could also be zero.
I wouldn't change it, but that's a big lump sum.
Everybody, to me, that I heard through this presentation and the development of this is do not anticipate that you are going to be able to lower tolls or make any substantial discounts in the first 5 years.
Right.
Right? They take into account like and usage and diversion and all the things like, some level of discount in the policy. That's why we want to have the policy discussion before they start doing the investment grade. They'll take all of that into account. But I think the biggest thing for me is that there's been a lot of discussion, when can we lower tolls? And just everybody should probably have in their mind, we are not going to change this toll rate for at least the first 5 years after the bridge opens.
Well, technically, we will be changing it. It'll be going up. It'll go from 175 to 220.
Chance that it goes up, then it will go down.
It's not tolling what
Just. I think I want to make sure everybody is hearing that because.
Yeah, but so the critical thing to remind people associated with that though is that we only have one purpose, which is to build a bridge and to keep the rates low. We serve the ratepayer on that. So it's different than the port with multiple missions.
Yes.
So it will be what it has to be. That there won't be any fluff in there. We're not using money for anything else. Right. So it's reality.
Right.
And I think, I've, again, people ask me this all the time, and that's what I tell them, it's basically what it's also going to be. It's like, they're going to be what they need to be to get the bridge built, and no more.
Yes.
And people find that acceptable, at least my friends do.
Yeah, I think that's much better than giving any indication that it might be going down.
Yeah.
Because the chances of them going down. And probably the best case scenario is that you don't have to do the first 5-year increase. Right, that first 15% bump maybe doesn't have to happen, maybe it's less than that. But it won't be until that period of time, so you're talking 2040, probably before maybe
2035.
No, not, right, so. I just wanna make sure, I can get concerned, people think you're gonna be rolling in cash. You're not gonna be rolling in cash, you're barely gonna make your bills for the first few years.
You won't be collecting revenue unnecessarily, to your point. It's gonna, yeah, and again, I would also say flexibility begins after bridge opening, and then to your point, 5 years after bridge opening. And so that forces some discipline through this period, because you're all sitting on a revenue forecast, which may or may not begin where you think it's going to begin. So you sort of have to say, okay, our policy and our toll rate setting and our messaging is very much consistent with this forecast. So that's something to be mindful of.
So it's.
Hey, Peter, this is Mark Reno.
Process.
This is Mark Reno. I just wanted to add one thing about the rating agencies. When they assign a rating, it's not something that they view fluctuates from year to year depending on your performance. It's a category that they view as a long-term, they're looking at a 30-year financing. And unless things substantially change in the environment, they expect that rating to stay the same. So they're expecting you to be triple B minus unless things are very, very different from the way that they're viewing it the day that they assign you that rating. And the only way to persuade them that things are very, very different is to show them several years of performance that is either above or below what they took into consideration when they assigned the rating.
Yeah, helpful comment, Mark.
So, let me test this to see if there's any, how this affects the discussion. I've been clear, and I think several of us have talked about how it's our goal that when the bridge is in place and is operating, to get ODOT to take it over. Put on ODOT's books to make to get out of the business of this being a locally owned bridge. How, if this were an ODOT owned bridge and they assumed all of the debt associated in the toll system, et cetera, would this whole thing change dramatically at that point?
If this were an ODOT bridge, if they said, hey, this is our bridge and we're going to create this legal structure that has, you only have access to the toll road revenues coming off of this bridge, and we're not going to create any sort of backstop. We're not going to guarantee the operating maintenance costs, or then it would look just the way it does.
Okay.
But certain state agencies do, provide sort of a moral backstop, if you will, and that gets some credibility. And some do say, I'll pay operating costs. And so you could have first crack at gross revenues, and that allows you to keep your rates lower.
Okay.
So yeah.
Those are things to think about. Great. That's helpful. Thank you.
One other thing is having a stronger credit rating impacts your tolls how?
Yeah, since you're not going to the public markets, rates when you go out and sell your bonds publicly are very much dependent on the rating of those bonds. And so that would be, if you have a AAA rated bond, it's going to get a lower rate than a triple B minus bond. And, by a full percentage point or over 150 basis points. And so that directly relates to the cost of your borrowing, the rating on your bonds. Here, again, TIFIA just requires an investment grade, and everybody gets the same rate, whether you're AAA or triple B minus.
But the rating for this agency is that you have to maintain anything you do that drops you below investment grade is what's correct.
There'll be legal covenants. There'll be specific sort of numerical covenants. Mark could speak to some of those, but it's going to be a rate covenant. If you fall below 125, we are going to legally compel you to increase rates, and you'll have to agree to that. They'll also say
if they crack down on you, if you come in with less than so the good thing is at triple B minus, you're getting the same cost of borrowing as a triple A borrower. You're borrowing at the same rate that Sound Transit, which has a AAA, borrows from TIFIA. And so that's fantastic. It means that you've been able to get the best deal possible for someone at your rating. The downside is that you can't go any lower without being in default. And once you're in default with TIFIA, the kinds of things that they do is they will debar you from receiving other federal funds. They can just make your life very difficult.
So let's not go there.
Yeah, you don't want to be in default. And so you're getting the best deal possible so long as you don't drop below the triple B minus.
So what can we assume? We've got our commitments from the states, but the timing of the cash is off, maybe by upwards of a year. And we're building a $500 million bridge, and say we've got $70-80 million that we need in quick cash on top of the TIFIA. What can we expect our interest rates to be with our triple B minus?
If you go out and
if we need to go out and get cash at the time.
You're talking about gap funding or
gap funding?
If it's gap funding and you need a short-term loan to carry you, is that the idea?
Until the grants kick in.
Until the grants kick in.
Well, in that scenario, wouldn't we just draw TIFIA earlier?
No, see, we're already drawing it.
We've already drawn TIFIA because we'll draw that first because that's going to be your cheapest money.
Right.
So for
Oh, so
over
at the very, very end, you mean?
million.
We're gonna draw TIFIA when we have to draw TIFIA. Right now, we're planning to draw it.
If you draw it any earlier than what we have in the plan, you will not be able to borrow 105 million because the interest starts accruing the minute you draw it. And so that increases your debt service down the road, which decreases your coverage down the road. So if we borrow any earlier, you won't get to borrow 105 million.
We also wouldn't have the reserve set aside. The amount.
Right.
In the reserve.
Yes, and the reserve, the debt service reserve. But if we went to the bank and it was for, wouldn't that be like a grant anticipation note, which would that be a bit better interest than just a straight out?
You know, the thing is with the grant anticipation notes, they really, Mark could speak to this as well. They work for some specific federal grant programs pretty well, you know. Federal programs that have been around a long time that you could really bank on and have funding, like in the transit space, like the Section 5309 funds or Urban Formula 5307 funds. They've been flowing to these transit agencies for decades. It's like, we're going to borrow against some of those. Like, okay, that'll get you into the single A category. Here we have like an infra grant, which is tied to a specific project, and a bunch of terms and conditions come with that grant. And that is not, you know, we haven't really tested the waters to go out and just borrow against a single standalone grant, which has a little bit, you know, some terms and conditions inherent to it. So I wouldn't bank on being able to easily go out and do a grant anticipation note.
So Peter, another question related to that would be, would you be able to go out to the bond market and get a TIFIA sign based on your current toll rate? Does the 105 basically max out their credit worthiness?
Here's the challenge. Yes, I think it does. Yeah.
How much leverage?
You would be able to get a bond.
I mean, Tiffany
Right.
might even say like, we won't allow for any parity, you know, debt on this toll revenue stream until certain metrics start to improve, until you show some coverage levels with actuals after opening. So that would be tricky. That'd be tricky. Yeah, I mean, here's, I guess, where we hope rates come down, and so we have a little cushion built into this. Costs come in pretty close to where you're hoping, so you got a little bit of cushion to this, and then the grant funds come on time. And then if, you know, costs stay as they are, the grant funds don't come on time. But the interest rates come down, then maybe we can draw the TIFIA loan earlier and we'll be able to ramp up to the 105. That would be kind of using the levers.
But it sounds like to me, we got to control the costs.
Yes.
We gotta, if we see things are starting to move in the wrong direction, we need to maximize other grant potential that we can get. And depending on how big of a problem we have, last step is to do a loan.
You can only do a loan if you do a rate increase.
Yeah, a loan sounds like it's pretty close to impossible.
Well, beyond 105, 105 million, we can start drawing on the TIFIA loan earlier. Yep. And then if rates, you know, instead of being 4.6 or, you know, 3.9 in the future, that would help us.
Yeah. What we've got some control over is the two that I talked about.
Cost and
More grants.
and grants. Yeah, that is the strategy. Yeah, it's hard to leverage. We're kind of looking at a fully leveraged. We got the BBB minus on 105 million off of this forecast.
That or build some big thing that drives in a bunch of traffic in here, and your traffic growth is way
Traffic
bigger than that.
increase, yeah.
Well,
Like the
and
numbers. Just hire some people that drive really big trucks over the other two bridges.
Yeah.
Really slow.
100,000 cover.
All right.
I think Mark, yes.
what are the last several $1 million of expenditure in this project's budget? What do they go toward?
Whole bridge.
It's a removal of the current bridge.
It's a rhetorical question, wasn't it, Mark?
Yes.
I think it's point. We chatted about.
We'll have a bridge sitting there for a
What
while.
if the rating agencies say, shoot, what if you don't deliver the project and you've got this price tag associated with it? Well, part of that price tag is taking down the old bridge, but you could still open the bridge and generate revenue. And
We already thought about that.
yeah, so
No, we're not, so.
That your last resort for Oregon.
So
the last resort for how we're gonna get the Oregon funding.
Well, yeah, or maybe you can, there's some additional funding we could go after as far as a grant for removal of the bridge,
Exactly.
environmental or
We're
something.
not in compliance with the EIS at that point, right?
And somebody will be on you about giving us a.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you will violate your.
But for people who want to get repaid, those are your problems, not their problems.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, you have a headache on your hand, but when they're looking at how are we going to get our loan repaid, your replacement bridge is open and the money is flowing. And so that's a very different credit consideration from their standpoint.
Yeah.
That is correct.
I think if you have an old bridge there, it's that can't be used. That's why you should get money over than a bridge that's almost ready to open.
Yeah.
So
This presentation was, this was a fantastic.
Opener.
Thank you for all, you really were able to answer, I think, everyone's questions, so I just want to say thank you for all the time and effort in all of this, so you really, I personally appreciate this.
Yeah, oh, thank you. That's good to hear. A team effort. We've been talking about this as a team, but I think it's time. So it's time, and partly because nothing has been legally promised right now. All we have done is structure a loan around a forecast and submitted that for an indicative rating, and now we're submitting it to TIFIA. So it's getting incrementally more real, right? But if somebody said, shoot, I didn't agree to this, well, you haven't legally agreed to anything yet. We're just saying, this is what you need to be prepared to, though, soon. And if you need to discuss it at a certain level, now is the time to do that. But thank you. I appreciate the time.
Any other questions?
Just generally keep in mind, every bit of debt we take on requires us to either achieve more in grant or raise more in revenue. And there's only one way that we're going to raise more in revenue. So.
Just like saying the word grant a lot.
No.
And Grant's gonna fix all of this.
Thanks.
Sure,
Grant.
whatever. Welcome to the party.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, sir. We have our directives. We're canceling the November 11th and December 23rd Bridge Authority meetings. We're going to schedule. We've actually done both of those things. Never mind. We have the Facebook Live polling event. Start time has been revised to 5:30, and that is on June 12th. That is on Wednesday, and our next meeting of the Bridge Authority will be Monday, June 24th, 2024, at 2 o'clock here. With that, I don't believe we have an executive session, correct, Mark and Judy? Good.
That is
With
correct.
that,
Yeah, I don't.
with that, is there any final roundtable discussion from any members? Not seeing any. Thank you all for the very late evening. I hope the record showed that Commissioner Gibson showed up, as well as we had somebody, another commissioner. Did you get that at the times? No, Seth didn't show up. Commissioner Edwards was on for.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Jake was there. Yep.
Yeah, so just make sure the notes show that. And with that and the consent of the governed, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.